All right, everyone, we're going to start to talk about a new project that is a two-part art project, and it's based off the idea of quilts or quilting. So we saw some artists such as the G's Ben Quilters and Faith Ringgold who design quilts. So the G's Ben Quilters design patterns with quilt squares, and they put those quilts together to make blankets that they sell for their community. And Faith Ringgold makes quilts that have stories on them, stories that are painted on them. So we're going to get inspiration from the G's Ben Quilters and Faith Ringgold to create a two-part art. A quilt that has a story in the middle and some patterns that show grid and sticking to a grid. So patterns that are looking like they are sticking to a quilt grid. So the first part I'm going to show you is how we're going to make these squares, and then later we'll talk about the story that's going to go in the middle. So at your table in your basket, you have some templates that look like this. These boxes here with the tiny boxes inside are called grids. We're going to try and create patterns inside of these grids that look similar to a quilt. So there are two ways that you can design your patterns. You can look at the pattern examples in your basket and try to copy these patterns, or you can think of your own designs that stick to the grid. So let's talk about what I mean by sticking to a grid. When we're sticking to a grid, we are trying to only make lines and shapes that fit within the square, or cut the square in half to make a triangle. So if I was drawing a pattern onto my grid here, I could use my marker to fill in a whole box one color, so that would be a square. Or I could use my marker to cut this square in half from corner to corner and make a triangle. I could cut this square in half from corner to corner to make an opposite triangle. And these are all sticking to the grid. Now, one thing that would not stick to the grid is if I took my marker and I went like this. I was starting on the line here, but then I went curvy around, and then I was going all over the place, and I really wasn't sticking to the grid lines at all. These kind of went off the grid lines. This is not allowed. This does not stick to the grid, and these are not the types of lines and shapes that we're going to use for the grid. So this is not something that you can do. You are not allowed to use circles or anything curvy. These are called organic shapes. We're only going to use geometric shapes that stick to the grid. Squares, triangles. Okay, so again, I can use these patterns to try and follow, to copy onto my grid squares. So if I wanted to copy one of these, I would find my first color that I wanted to start with, which might be purple. So I would look at the pattern and use my marker to try and copy the first square. So the first square is just purple, so I'm just going to outline it and then color it in all the way purple. Now the next box here is half purple, half green. So I need to go from corner to corner and make a triangle and color half purple, and then I will color half green. So I'll color half of the other triangle green. Next box here looks like it's kind of a bluish color, so I can use a bluish color to fill that square in. And then again, the next box is the half bluish color and half green. So I would go back in with half green. So going box by box would help me finish this whole pattern. So I can keep going and finish this pattern by myself. Now, if I wanted to make my own pattern that sticks to the grid, I can try and think of my own pattern by just using squares and triangles. So an example of this could be how I made a letter. I made the letter N by figuring out how I could make just boxes of squares and just triangles to make an object that I recognize, like a letter N for my name. I could also figure out how to make an object like a flower. So by just using squares and triangles to make a geometric design of a flower. This kind of reminds me of pixel art, or the art that you might see in a video game or Minecraft, the way that it's just boxes of color. So I can figure out how to make my own idea. So it's a really great idea to copy some, but also to think of your own. This tells me that you're thinking outside of the box when you create your own patterns. So I can use these second two to create my own, and I can copy two on my other worksheet. So last thing I'm going to show you here are just 3 examples of what we do not want to do. So when we're copying a pattern onto our grid, One thing we do not want to do is just color random boxes. This really isn't a pattern and it doesn't show a picture. So it doesn't show a pattern like this one where I'm repeating these triangle shapes to show a design, and it's not creating a recognizable picture. So this is just kind of random colors. It's not really what we want here. So this would be something that I could not do. Second thing that I should not do is if I'm going to make an object like a heart using triangles and squares, I need to figure out how I'm going to color the background as well. So I can't just leave this white. I need to color this in all the way with color over the whole thing. So I can figure out how to make triangles and squares to color in the background space around the heart. So color your whole square. Do not leave any of your squares with white spaces. Third thing I do not want to see is this type of coloring. When you're coloring in a square, I do not want you to just go like this with your marker. You have to outline your box and then color in all the white space all the way. Okay, so 3 things that are off limits. Background space, not need coloring, and no patterns. Okay, and finally, not sticking to the grid is off limits as well. You have to stick to boxes and triangles. Okay, so your goal is to create 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 of these patterns using your blank worksheets and either copying some designs or thinking of your own designs. So that's the first part of our art project. Later, we will talk about how to create the story picture in the middle.